my background, my Zoom background, is the cast of My Fair Lady at the Ohio Theater taking their final bow last year on March 11th. And on the very next day, theaters went dark. A week after the theater shut down, the Arnold had already lost its fans. Columbus's Cameron Mitchell's shut down all operations, along with the Rusty Bucket, laying off about 5,800 people. And somewhere in there, Cameron Mitchell told the governor that, let it be known, I can only reopen one time. It's important for us to know as business leaders that the sector that the restaurant industry represents is a key employer for the state of Ohio. And while these jobs and others were being lost, their employers were figuring out how to survive and if it was even possible. So as the restaurants and their suppliers were going dark, the lights at the Ohio Restaurant Association were staying on. The Ohio Restaurant Association is a business trade association with a mission focused on promoting and protecting the restaurant, food service, and hospitality industry. Our speaker today, the association's president and CEO, John Barker, knows this business very well. And along with a very capable team at the association, they took on the entire burden of this industry for the state of Ohio. Along with many other experiences, John was on the leadership team of one of the largest restaurant operations in the world, serving as Senior Vice President and Chief Communications Officer for Wendy's from 1996 to 2014. Prior to that, he had many experiences, including the Plain Dealer in Cleveland and American's Greetings. You'll see that John has a very upbeat spirit, and maybe he learned some of that from being at American Greetings. John has over 2 decades of experience working with investment banking, consulting, Deloitte, and many, many more. I know that while he was at Wendy's, John would often field calls from Morgan Stanley's research team that focuses on restaurants. In addition to his work at the Ohio Restaurant Association, he has served as a trustee on the board of directors at the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, the board at Ohio Dominican University, and for Catholic Social Services. He previously served as a director for the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce and was president of the National Investor Relations Institute for Central Ohio. John has an MBA from the Fisher College of Business at the Ohio State University, where he is an adjunct professor. He is a graduate from Waynesburg University in Pennsylvania. And John and his wife, Sherry, live here in Central Ohio, I believe still here in Dublin, and have 3 adult children. John, let me turn this over to you.
Hey, thanks, Jim. That all sounded pretty good. You sound a little bit like one of those late night announcers introducing the host, right? That was pretty good. You know, good
well, it's better than a late night infomercial, so thank you.
That's true. It was very nice to see everybody. It's the way that we've been interacting with everybody for the last year on Zoom. It is odd, but it's the world we live in, and you know, so we're going to all of us will make the most of it. Hey, Jim, I don't know who's kind of running the show here in terms of the technology. Would it be helpful? I do have slides, or I can just speak to them. Would it be helpful to see the slides, or what's the protocol?
Scott, can we give John the ability to share?
Already done.
Oh, okay. So let's see here. Can you see that, Scott?
We see the entirety of the your PowerPoint, meaning we see the presentation and your sidebar.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, there's nothing secret in there. Although the secret recipe for the chili at Wendy's is in one of the slides. If you catch it, you can have it. If not, you know, you can't have it. I used to get asked that all the time. Jim used to say, "Come on, I need a frosting machine, you know, can't you set me up?" And I was never able to deliver that. But anyways, good morning, and it's great to be with everybody. I'm going to go through a little bit about this year for restaurants. I really want to look forward a bit and share a few things with you. The one thing I would say to you is that, you know, we are a trade association, and many of you know what that is. Jim ran through some numbers. It's about 585,000 employees that we represent, and about 25 billion in revenue. So it's the second biggest industry for the state. If you, of course, the government would be the largest, and then the healthcare industry, and then restaurants in that order. And so we do a lot, like most trade associations, for our members. This past year, we've had to do more and different things, including things like a relief fund and focusing on workforce development and a number of other things. We've been, honestly, like a lot of businesses, we've been in a crisis mode for about 12 months. But I thought what I'd go through is pretty quickly some information I thought might be helpful for you. Talk about this unprecedented year that we've been through. Have we seen some trends that were coming anyways accelerate? And I think the answer is yes, and I'll show you a few of those, and then we'll just look ahead a little bit on what we think might be coming. It's really been, for many of our operators, their words, the most challenging 12 months in modern history for them, and they've really, I try to characterize this for different audiences, and I've used this imagery because this is what it's felt like. Probably felt like this for all of you individually, that you've had incredible ups and downs during the past 12 months, and our industry, was really in a golden age, coming from the mid-2000s, say 15, all the way through February of 2020, and then since then, it's been just crazy, up and down, and some, felt like a recovery, and then kind of a whirlwind of going the other direction. And so where we are right now is we're kind of settling out, and things are beginning to improve, and so that's good. We look at a lot of data, like many of you do. This was a big survey that was done by the National Restaurant Association. It's about a month old, but back then, and this hasn't changed too much, about 6 in 10 operators think it's going to take another 7 months before business conditions return to normal. About another third think it might take as many as 12 months. 10% say it will never return to normal. What does normal mean? Well, full recovery, back to pre-COVID sales levels, for sure, but no more restrictions, no health restrictions. Everybody's vaccinated, and the public is confident of going out. So that's kind of their mood right now. If you look at 2020, overall restaurant sales for the entire category down in the mid-teens. In Ohio, the impact was about, for a lot of our independents, which is what we serve everybody, but our independents are the kind of the core of any trade association. About half of those were down anywhere between 20 and 70%. Then if you have a business and you're down 70%, you can imagine what it's like to survive month to month. So that's kind of where it has been. And then I get asked the question a lot, well, how many restaurants have closed? Our estimates, it's just in Ohio, north of 4,000 locations have closed. We're not sure if any of those will be able to get reopened, but that's the number so far, and it's a pretty big, obviously a pretty big number. There are winners and losers in everything. The winners in this past year have been folks that are in categories like pizza or fast casual, like you might be familiar with Chipotle and places like that. They've actually turned and put up positive sales as the year has gone on. It's pretty amazing to watch, and part of it is they were built to survive COVID. And the losers, unfortunately, are family sit-down restaurants, buffets, fine dining, caterers have just been absolutely crushed. Most of the losers in all this has been our independent operators, the mom and pops up and down all our streets in Ohio. Now, we've had some support for the industry, and we're very thankful for this. We advocated and lobbied for the Paycheck Protection Program. You may have heard about that, which covers about 5.5 months of payroll for these folks, but that's 5.5 months out of 12. So it's a help, it's a lifeline. We also lobbied for the retention tax credits for employees. Some state programs have come through, and you may have heard that the Bureau's Worker Comp kicked in dividend refunds for the state, which have been very, very helpful. If you look at that chart on the lower left side, you see the level of where sales were in the industry, about 65 billion in the month of February. And you can see how we have been tracking through January. We're now in sort of that mid $55 billion level. So we have a long way to go to get back to pre-pandemic, but we are beginning to see a little bit of an uptick, particularly the first couple of weeks of March, which is great. From the trend standpoint, on the right-hand side, one of the things that we are watching next is the governor has said we have to get the 50 cases out of 100,000 residents to be able to drop the health orders. And we're in no rush necessarily to do that. That's everything from the mask to the 6-foot distancing, things like that the health officials tell us are critical. But the 6-foot distancing is still limiting very significantly the ability for a restaurant to get anywhere back to pre-pandemic levels. Most of our restaurants are back to about 50 to 70% of their pre-pandemic, the amount of people they can actually get into their facility. So that's just a governor on the return for that. Of course, light at the end of the tunnel are the vaccines. Everybody is probably aware of this if you watch, Mike DeWine. The most important breakthrough will be starting a week from now on March 29th, when all Ohioans will be eligible if you're 16 or older. And so that'll really kind of change the game, because a lot of our restaurant employees, especially the entry level, are high school and college kids, and being able to get them vaccinated so that they are confident to go back to work, and that consumers are confident when they go into a restaurant. Many of our operators are going to incentivize their staff to go and get vaccinated, and it could be everything from time off to a bonus, things like that, because they want to actually be able to have that. So that's good news. We're happy to see all that, as you can imagine, right? As we look ahead, and this information really came from Jim brought together one of his more brilliant analysts, a guy named John Glass at Morgan Stanley, spoke to our group, and the belief is that in 2021 we'll bounce back. Sales will bounce back about 10% for the full year versus the previous year. You might think, well, that's not much, but it's probably going to be mid-year before we're really kind of chugging with sales, maybe even into the back half of the year. 2022 could be another 7%. Historical is somewhere around 4 to 5 to put in the context. What this will mean is it'll be 2023 before an average operator is back to where they were before all this. That's if they survive. One of the big things that we're looking at is consumer confidence, and we track this very carefully. You can see that, we bottomed out during the pandemic. It's bounced back a little bit, but it's nowhere near. You need an index up around 100 for consumers to be out and spending pretty freely. Although I have heard RV sales are up, but that doesn't help us too much. But our category needs consumer confidence up to do well. Our publicly traded companies put out numbers. You can see that the ones at the end of the fourth quarter, when they put those numbers out that are doing well, are almost delivery only or drive-through. If you look all the way down at the bottom, and there's just examples of sit-down restaurants. This is Intuitive, obviously. The ones with sit-down in-store service are the ones that are scrambling the most. So there's a lot of trends that we saw coming before all this. I want to hit a few. They're kind of fun to take a look at. Are they going to continue, right? So you're going to see a lot of this, changing real estate formats. You're going to see a lot of delivery only. You're going to see pickup lanes in places you never saw before, like Chipotle. They're going to do lanes, for you to pick up. The pictures at the top right are Young's Jersey Dairy. If some of you might be familiar with that down in Yellow Springs. Dan Young, the proprietor, and his family actually put a drive-thru in for the first time in their history. And the time I was there, it was about 200 cars in line to go through and get ice cream. And it just snakes through his parking lot. He had hay bales up to kind of drive people and to take orders outside and things like that. It's kind of fun. People have to be resilient and figure out a way to do that. This to-go sales. Before the pandemic, at full service restaurants, a good to-go sale percentage was around 10 to 15%. It has doubled during the pandemic, and it's likely to stay higher than it was before. And that's some good news if they can keep the sales. The issue is, will they keep it, or will people come back and only want to eat in? And we're yet to know for sure how this is going to go. But to go has really gone. You've seen a lot of better technology in place because of this. People can order online. Better packaging has come out of this, and a lot of deals, right, to get people to come and support a restaurant. An area that is really driven by millennials and Gen Z. So millennials, obviously, in their 20s to early 30s. Gen Z are teenagers who are just coming into the years that they're spending all your money, either as a parent or grandparent. But they have a lot of money, and it's a force, right? And it's the force that marketers are looking at. What we found interesting is that we believe that digital adoption accelerated by 3 to 4 years. Mobile ordering, loyalty programs, apps, all that moving. And it's not just the younger and technology hip companies, it's everybody has been moving to this, right? Very aggressive social media. Interestingly, to give you some idea, two of the most successful companies in the last 5 years, and they really surged during the pandemic, Chipotle and Wingstop. Digital as a percent of total sales went from 20% of their total sales in 19 to more than 30% in the first quarter, and they're now trending over 50%. And they would like it to see it go to probably 100%. So it's just an interesting trend. You may not be able to order food at a place like this. If, for example, if you want to get a ticket to get in to see the Blue Jackets game, you got to have an app today, right, to get in. That felt very odd to many of us, but this is the direction everything's going with technology. Third-party delivery has absolutely boomed. It hit $50 billion in total gross food value in the past year, and the growth was about 85%. Some of us use this all the time. Some of us don't use it. Some of us can't stand it. Doesn't matter. It's there. It's unlikely to go the other direction anytime soon. Millennials and Gen Z are driving this, but it's not just those age groups. All the cohorts have actually figured out a way to use this, and it's here to stay. It's very expensive, obviously, for the restaurant. We're not crazy about it as an association because many of the third-party guys charge a 30% fee to the restaurant on top of whatever the menu cost is. So it's difficult for the restaurants. Have you heard of ghost kitchens? First time I started talking about this, people ask me as well, you have a ghost in your kitchen, obviously, when you cook and they're in there, knocking equipment around or something like that. No, it's not. It's really, it's a no storefront restaurant. And all you have is essentially a cook and a runner. And that runner takes food to a counter, and at that counter, all the third-party people come and pick up the food. So as a consumer, you cannot go to this restaurant. You can only order it online, and this is exploding as a trend. Columbus has two major ones and several smaller ones in development as we speak. We believe, and we take a look at some data, Euromonitor thinks this business alone can end up being $1 trillion business by 2030. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. And I'll comment on this in just a minute. This is a trend clearly driven by younger people who've grown up with technology. They do go out, but they may feel that getting the food delivered and having that social experience in their home is satisfactory for them. Everybody's jumping into this. This is one of the favorite guys on the Food Network. You may have seen this guy yelling at you from your TV, Guy Fieri. He actually grew up in Columbus, interestingly. But he's bringing a ghost kitchen out called Flavortown, and he's got him in 27 states, and he's opening all over Cincinnati. Interestingly, he's not opening anything. It's just a brand. The food actually comes from a Bravo restaurant or a Buca di Beppo. He's just a brand. You order the food, you can't actually go and get it. You can only get it delivered. And obviously, he's putting a lot behind it. A sister to this is what they call virtual brands, and this is where a restaurant that has a sit-down restaurant, but their sales are down significantly, so they create a brand within that physical facility, but it's delivery only. To give you an example, some of you may know Chili's. There's some Chili's here around Central Ohio. They've created a brand called It's Just Wings. They use the restaurant, the Chili's kitchen, to make the product. You can only have it delivered. You cannot walk in and get the product at the Chili's. And it's a wings brand, and they believe this is going to generate $150 million in additional sales for them in the next year. Just kind of interesting. This one blew my mind. I think if I asked anybody on this call if you ordered from Mr. Beast Burger, the answer would probably be no. If you ask your kids or your grandkids or your nieces and nephews, they know about this. This has exploded on the kind of the app scene and on TikTok and everything else. This is a brand that literally went from 0 to 300 locations overnight. And the product is made in a number of different locations. You can only get it delivered. It's basically hamburgers and French fries. But it was the most downloaded app for a period of time. And again, this is the barriers to entry to get in the restaurant industry appear to have changed maybe forever. Wall Street loves this kind of stuff. Just give you one example, Doordash, which is one of the it's actually the biggest delivery company. You can see the kind of the market share over to the left. They have about 56% of it. They went public at 120 a share. It's now trending at about 170 share market cap of 54 billion. They've yet to make a dollar. In fact, their gap loss last year was 312 million. Wall Street values things differently today than they used to. Jim and I have chatted about this a little bit, obviously, right? They're being valued on potential revenue growth like, perhaps we've never seen. It's just interesting to watch. They are betting on an organization like this being successful. So where does all this go? Do these pandemic trends continue? Well, these virtual ghost kitchen and delivery trends are likely to continue. And here's the reasons. To do this stuff, much lower investment. You don't have to have all the capital cost of building a 4,000 square foot restaurant. The return on investment on some of these businesses have proven to be 12 months, cash on cash, 100% return on investment. So do you build, do you open one of these, or do you try to open an Applebee's? Those are the questions that operators are going to be looking at. It's friction-free for consumers. It's easy to track all the orders, a lot of data, so you can do loyalty and offers. Very easy to scale this. You only need a few employees versus trying to have 50 or 60 employees. You do have major marketing investment, obviously, right? And from a consumer standpoint, again, certain age groups seem to love this. Some are a little less resistant. I encourage people, when you think about this, talk to younger people in your life and get their points of view. I'm interested in that, but I'm also interested in what the data says. And the data says this is a kind of a freight train coming at us. And I'll finish up with a couple things on looking forward. We track a lot of data. We love looking at open table. That's something that a lot of folks in the industry look at. It basically looks at the reservations that are being made. In mid-February, the open table reservations were down 44%, but that was still the best since the fall. Ohio was down about 42%. That has trended much better in March. We believe those numbers are probably going to be down about 20% in March, year over year. We're going to have to actually start looking at 2019 as a control, but those numbers are coming very nice, particularly with better weather. You can see the black box intelligence numbers are getting better. Traffic is still down, but we're seeing sales better because obviously people are getting the sales. And then the other thing we like from one perspective is as Americans get those checks that are going to be arriving, we do think they're going to spend a lot of it at restaurants. At least that's what they've done historically. So we're obviously optimistic that that can happen as those checks, those $1,400 checks and other money starts arriving. The question though is, will consumers snap back to pre-COVID norms? Right? This is the big question. Do they desire experiences? Do they want human interaction? Do they love service and hospitality that they normally get at a restaurant, the bar, maybe the clubs that they go to, the venues? I bet if I did a poll of this group being, people who are a little bit more mature and maybe previous business owners or business owners today, we would probably fall in the camp of yes, we do want to return to this. But you got to look at 330 million people altogether, and the bets you have to make are based on those big cohorts that are in place and what will happen. And so we don't know for sure. I do think that, based on what we're hearing, there will be some snapback, but the trends that we've saw, some of those will stick too. One of the big issues that we're watching carefully, and this is obviously a controversial one, is a major focus on federal minimum wage and the elimination of the tip credit. Minimum wage is an issue for many industries, not just the restaurant industry, but it's particularly difficult in an industry like this one where the margins are typically 5 to 6%, which is not really understood by the public, clearly is not understood by elected officials. If you, for example, take the federal minimum wage from $7.25, which nobody makes today, nobody makes $7.25. Even our lowest entry-level high school kid, you can't hire for $7.25 today. But this notion they're going to drive it to 15 would be a challenge. The tip wage issue, eliminating that altogether, would be specifically for this industry. We have polled on this with our operators nationally. In the most recent one we did in Ohio, 72% of operators are against this kind of an increase in the minimum wage. They know the minimum wage is going to go up. They know we need to increase it on the federal level, and they understand that. But you got to be careful how you do it. We'd like to have an opportunity, obviously, to see it stair-stepped over time. And then 93% of operators oppose the elimination of the federal tip credit. When we ask people who are actually servers, 95% of them are opposed to the elimination of the tip credit. And the reason is they currently make $19 to $25 in that range. They currently make that much. They do not want to go back to a $15 minimum wage. They would actually see a pay decrease, and they would step out of the industry if that occurred. And so we're obviously concerned about that. And then just lastly, these are the big issues. We're obviously do a lot of advocacy work in this industry, and so health and confidence, consumer confidence is a big one. Where do we go with herd immunity? We're at 30% of Ohioans now have the vaccine, at least the first shot. How this impacts consumer confidence. We obviously, everybody's watching the variants to see what kind of a risk that is. And obviously, depending on where that goes, would you see states and cities locked down again? We're obviously watching that carefully. I mentioned the policy issues a minute ago with the federal minimum wage and tip credit. Obviously, there's a lot of legislation that's being considered that would significantly impair businesses and your ability to operate your business as profitably today as you did yesterday. From a business conditions, one topic has become a critical issue literally in the last 2 months as businesses picked up, and that's staffing. I've been on the phone the last 4 or 5 days with operators who tell me their business is increasing. They cannot hire even one employee. There's no one available. And part of it is a lot of folks have left the restaurant and retail industry, or they're de-incentivized to go back to work because they're getting the stimulus checks and they're being told that unemployment will continue to at least the fall. We're watching some businesses recruit from each other, and so that can be, a challenge. And then, obviously, we're focused on workforce development, more to come on that. And then lastly, there's a bunch of stimulus that's out there. We're working on 2 major pieces right now. You may have heard the American Rescue Plan, which is the $1.9 trillion plan. Within that is this $26 billion restaurant revitalization fund. We're obviously working with Congress and the Small Business Administration on this to try to get those funds and those applications available as quickly as possible to help people. That could be the difference between many of our restaurants surviving and not surviving. And then the governor has issued his first budget draft, and that's out there. There's a couple $100 million available in that for restaurants and bars, and we're working to try to accelerate that a little bit. And those grants would be available to operators that have shown a loss. And so we're working on that pretty quickly and trying to make that happen. So that's my prepared comments. Jim, I'll throw it back to you.
Well, I'm just I'm looking to see, John, if you were actually giving us a question here, but we will certainly take questions now. So if you want to put them in chat, or if you want to just unmute yourself and ask Mr. Barker a question, that'll be great.
I was putting a note in chat about whether we could get a chance to see the slides or get a copy of the slides that he used, because they were terrific, but they were kind of small to read on screen. I was mostly listening to what he was saying. But the question I have for you is this snap back to regular dining, is there any way that you can monitor that and get a readout on it? Because one of the biggest problems in massive changes like this is getting blindsided. And you just talked about the problem of not being able to hire staff, but that goes for everything. It applies to everybody.
Yeah, no, we'll be monitoring it very carefully, and we can monitor it because we'll be looking at percentage of sales on indoor dining versus takeout and delivery. And that'll take a little while to kind of really see where it shakes out. We probably won't know where it's going to end in terms of a run rate, so probably late summer. We'll start to get a bit of a read on this. It's already snapping back. I'll tell you where it's snapping back. It's snapping back in suburbs and our rural restaurants. It's slower to snap back in our urban cores. And the reason is the urban cores are almost empty. If you go down to downtown Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Toledo, you name it, right? Busy on the weekends, but lunchtime, no one's downtown. No one's in the downtown. So,
as I have not been in my office for a year, no, I haven't gone to lunch downtown for that period of time. John Stewart, I think your question, not necessarily one to John Barker, about, weren't we supposed to have already flattened the curve, therefore shouldn't we be open now? I think every owner in the restaurant industry would support the idea of limiting restrictions on them. And many of them have been reduced, and we've kind of pushed back the curfews and whatnot. And I think you're pushing on the thought that flatten the curve only was a mitigator for our ICUs and emergency rooms. It did not do anything to actually remove the virus from our society. So I understand your point there, but I just don't know that there's a question for John unless you want to address it in any way.
Well, at this point, the governor has stated what the policy is, right? You got to hit 50 cases per 100,000 residents. I mean, that's the line in the sand on removing the restrictions. And we're about 143 today. And to put that in perspective, we were at, we were over 1,000 not that long. I mean, these numbers are coming down rapidly. They have plateaued a bit, though, in the last 2 weeks. Number of cases have plateaued on a daily basis to around 1,500. And it seems like it's not moving much off of that right now, Jim.
Jim Bartha, you asked about questions. States like Texas and Florida dropped all safety restrictions. I mean, John Mariotti, I think you're probably seeing this already in Florida, where the people from Miami come over to Naples because the Miami restaurants are still shut down, despite what we're seeing for spring break. There is a lot of potential. The way you want to interpret the numbers coming out of these states still allows for a lot of questions. So I'm not sure we can address that very well. Again, John Barker, if you've got anything to say on that.
I think that we've seen states put a lot of numbers out in terms of how they're doing. We've watched Florida be pretty much wide open as a state. Some of the cities are sort of locked down. We actually have operators who are based here in Ohio but have Florida operations, and their numbers there are significantly better in terms of sales, obviously, and they've actually probably made a little bit of money. And I think we are supportive in moving in that direction as quickly as possible, obviously, to remove the restrictions. Obviously the risk is if you move too fast and the numbers started going the other direction, particularly ICUs and hospitalizations, would you have to, would you think health officials would move to another lockdown? That's the issue right now. Nobody knows. We just don't know.
And as some of the questions go on, it is probably fair to say that the restaurant and entertainment industries have been singled out in the pandemic to, I don't want to say as a scapegoat, but carrying the brunt of our legislative reactions to COVID. So they've got the farthest to come back.
Yeah, as we look at these industries, the categories are restaurants, bars, caterers, hotels, and any form of entertainment, whether it's cruise lines. I know looks like you're at at one of the Kappa theaters downtown right now. It looks kind of empty. Where you are.
Well, that as I said in my intro, that was the Ohio Theater the night before the last day of My Fair Lady, before they shut down.
Go
ahead.
You mentioned the characteristic about people from Miami coming across to the West Coast. There's a phenomenon that we're observing, having been only here a month now, but the locals tell us the same thing. The traffic is worse than they've ever seen in Marco Island. I'm in a peculiar little enclave, but we were in Naples this weekend. It's the same in Naples. The long-term renters or the long-term owners are taking a windfall and cutting down to the shortest possible rental that they can get away with, so that they can rent at premium prices to people. Now that's good for the restaurants in most cases, because it brings new customers into the market who want to dine out, who don't have their own, aren't used to fixing food. So the restaurants are really quite busy, especially the ones that have a combination indoor-outdoor dining. I mean, we sit right next to a restaurant complex where they're parking cars everywhere but on top of the buildings. They're so crowded. I mean, it's unbelievable. Along the streets, and we wonder what the big mob scene was. Well, the answer was people can go out to restaurants and eat. John, this is good news for the trade. It says when the environment's right and desirable, people want to get back out and get together someplace. And I was just in one of them the other day and I forgot my mask, and it didn't matter because nobody in the restaurant had a mask on at all. Servers as well.
Yeah.
It's worth noting in Florida that mandates were done on a county by county basis and not on a statewide basis. Therefore, there are pockets of dramatically different reactions and restrictions.
Yeah.
And
we're feeling that here.
Yeah. As opposed to what John Barker said earlier, where I firmly feel that there are people who have been locked up for a year and are going to feel uncomfortable getting out of their cages. And, you know, for many of us, we're going to say, but I don't understand. But if you're not experiencing it, you don't understand.
Yes. Very good, John. Very entertaining.
And John, if you were the one asking about the slides, yes, I can send those over, and then whoever can distribute those, happy to provide those.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
It looked like a great presentation besides what you were saying.
So, hey, John, this is Chip. It looks like we had one other question by Jack Graff. He's asking about projection of the declining birth rate over the long-term effects of the industry, maybe over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chip. I don't think we're going to know what COVID did to the birth rate, but it is possible that we'll see it bounce back up next year, right?
That's true.
Because no one had anything else to do. Yeah.
Well, I think John was, or I think what he was referring to, John, though, was that we are having a lower birth rate in the United States, and he's asking us, do you see that potentially being an impact? Simply, will we have fewer clients to go to restaurants?
The answer to that for our industry and many industries is yes. It's interesting. I'm associated with a couple universities, and we are planning for a lower amount of students for the next 20 years in all of our strategic plans. There's not going to be as many students. So yes is the answer. We'll sort of be fighting for fewer customers.
Jack, your kids can fill the gap here, though. All right. We'll take this as the last comment. John Stewart, I'll make a quick point. I think that most people voluntarily distanced and stayed away from restaurants. So the state mandates were superfluous. Certainly debatable. I think many people did stay away. We'll see. We won't know till we get there.
Hey, is it okay if I jump in and ask a question here real quick? I think mine got lost in the chat.
Go ahead.
Yep. So I'll ask this one to John. Is there concern at the state level that tax revenues are going to remain depressed over the next couple of years because there's, I believe, still not state tax levied on takeout orders?
Yeah, that is a concern. As we went down and met with Lieutenant Governor looking at the budget, and we were talking a bit about that because we were showing him the data in terms of what was happening with takeout. So it's easy for an elected official to say, hey, we allowed you to do takeout and drive through, so all's good, right? And no, all is not good. Tax is one reason. The other thing is it's not good for employment. If you're only doing takeout or delivery or ghost kitchen, you need a fraction of your employees. The unemployment in the hospitality sector is still around 20%. And so those are all. So it's obviously sales tax, but it's also employer tax as well is going to be down. So yeah, they're looking at that at this industry, and they're going to get a little bit of a windfall, however, from the federal government if you've been watching this, and so that may help offset it.
All right. Well, John, we want to thank you for sharing your knowledge, and we wish the industry well. Hopefully we are heading back in the right direction. I think most people I talk to are anxious to get back. I know my parents just got their second vaccination. They were like, when can I go get a steak dinner? When can I go out? So I think there will be a lot of people that do want to get out of their cages and get back out there and experience that in person. So hopefully we will see that upturn sooner than later. Maybe we'll have you back later this year, or maybe in another year, and we'll get an update and see how things went.
Sounds good. Thank you,
All
Chip.
right.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Jim.
it. Thanks, Jim. Have a great rest of your week. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining today. Another great program. Thanks, Jim Bishop. I thought that was good information. I know everybody's curious about what's happening out in the rest of the world, and so invite your friends, invite other Rotarians, get them to show up on Monday on Zoom. We're going to still be doing this even after we meet in person. We'll still do some kind of hybrid. So, but we would like to get more people on. I hope everybody has a great rest of their week. Everybody have a great week, and we are adjourned.